Recording. We're set.
All right, good. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the March 19th, 2021 West Contra Costa Unified School District Budget Committee meeting. I call the meeting to order at, what time is it? You just blocked my clock, 3:04 p.m. and welcome to everybody. To begin with, we do have translation. And so if you speak Spanish and need translation to Spanish, please click on the interpretation button and pick Spanish and you will have translation services available. Please correct me if that's incorrect, but I think I do have it correctly. And then we will provide, this meeting will provide public comment opportunities through the Zoom app. To indicate your desire to speak on an agenda item, raise your hand by clicking on the appropriate icon in the Zoom app. In order to be recognized to speak, you must be logged in with your first and last name, and your hand must be raised before public comment begins for the item. Due to the Brown Act, board members cannot discuss items that are not on the agenda and do not usually respond to items presented in public comment. I would like to move on briefly to the land acknowledgement. We recognize that we are presently on the lands of the Chochenyo, Muwekma, Karkin, Ohlone people and acknowledge them as the first inhabitants of the land we currently occupy. And so with that, I'd like to move into roll call, please, and introductions. My name is Leslie Reckler, trustee of the West Contra Costa Unified School District, trustee Area 5, and chair of the Budget Committee. And President Phillips, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Mr. Phillips. I'm the president of the board and I am the trustee representing Area 3.
And who else do we have here today with us, please?
So we have several special speakers today. I'm very pleased to have from the county, the treasurer tax assessor, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Correction, treasurer tax collector?
Collector, sorry.
No problem, Tony. A lot of people get that mistake, but that's all right. I make that mistake. My name is Russell Watts, and I am your county treasurer and have been serving since 2011, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Thanks so much for being here.
Also from the county, Bob Campbell. I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, I'm Bob Campbell, the audit controller, and I've been the audit controller since 2011 as well. And it's great to be here with you.
Thanks for being here. As I've said before, this is my favorite part of the pandemic is being able to access all these minds and have people drop in via Zoom. This has just been terrific and I want it to continue. So thank you for being here. Who else do we have?
Our last and most important person is our director of all of our budget and financial information, Regina Weber, is with us.
Regina, I have a present for you.
And now I have it all nice and pretty and 8.5 by 11, and now you're not going to need it. My apologies, trustee Reckler.
Yeah, it's just a little paper joke. Okay, so.
And then we have in the audience, if we need them, our financial advisor from K&N, Blake Bohm, is on the phone. I don't think we're going to let him talk, but we're going to let him hang out with us. So we did bring in all our assets as it pertains to money.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Okay, and with that, let's have a roll call vote, please. I mean, roll call. I'm sorry. Let's have a roll call.
Roll call. Chair Reckler.
Reckler, present.
And member Phillips.
Present.
All here.
Okay. All right. And approval of the agenda. Is there any adjustments or anything on the agenda that needs attention?
I don't have anything.
Okay, so the only thing I have is that I'd like to put some times on this, if we can, for how much discussion time we need.
So I would think that I would go probably 40, 40, 20 would be ideal, or a little less because we're a little past that, but so 35, 35, 15.
Okay. Okay, let's do that then. And I also have to make some apologies. I'm not all together today. I got a shingles vaccine and I'm still being affected by it. So I'm like in that 0.00001% that took it hard. So bear with me. Okay. Okay. Then we have that. And then let's go to the minutes. So the minutes were sent out for January 22nd. I don't know if we need to pull them up. I already pre-read them. I don't know, President Phillips, do you want to pull them up? Take a look at them. Okay, I had one correction. There was one small word motion that was misspelled and I corrected it. And other than that, I see that that's how the minutes could be approved with just that small correction. And then do we have March 5th?
No, we do not yet.
Okay, so then let's, if we may, table March 5th until the next meeting and accept January 22nd as stands with one correction to motioned. And that's my, I move that.
Do you want me to make a motion or?
Sure, if you'd like to. Or you could
Okay.
just second what I just said.
Oh, okay. So I second what
Okay,
you just said.
okay, then I think we're good. Okay, we'll go on to public comment.
All right, let me take a look here. See if we have any hands today. We do not have any hands. So I believe that will be it for public comment.
Okay, all right, so we'll move into 2A, discussion on cash flow.
All right, give me half a second. And so, Bob, do you want to share your screen or do you want me to pull it up and share?
Why don't you go ahead, pull it up, and we'll just have the next screen to have you move it on, or next slide to move it up through the PDF.
Perfect. Give me just a second and I will pull that down right now.
And while you pull that up, I'll just give a little background here. Tony reached out and asked if we could provide some information as it relates to the teeter plan, how it impacts the cash flow and property taxes for the district. And he indicated that there was some interest in that. And I told him, I said, well, you know, for us to do justice, I need to invite Mr. Watts along because as the treasurer tax collector, integral part of that as well. So really our two offices have to work together, ensuring that the schools and other special districts and agencies have the treasury operations and cash flow activity that they need to support what they do. You know, Rusty was gracious enough to agree to participate in this. He's had quite a busy day already, I know. He did a presentation to another group earlier today. So I appreciate him joining and sharing in this. As you'll see, he has the most slides to give you the most detail, but I have fewer slides, but I'll probably ramble on longer and try and put you to sleep with what I have to say. So you don't ask too many questions. As you can see there, we kind of indicated the different topics that we'll be touching on. Rusty's going to be first. We'll talk about how taxes are collected and deposited, when the funds are distributed, just the teeter objectives, how general obligation bonds really do fit into the teeter program and kind of how that works as well. Tony, you're going to need to make the presentation a little bit smaller.
Yep. There we go.
There we go. How the temporary borrowing program works, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask some questions. For me, if you have a question while I'm talking, just interrupt me and I'll try and address it there. Don't save it till the end. I don't know if Rusty wants you to do the same, but you know, it's probably best to go ahead and try and answer the questions when they come up, and we can address them in the context of what we're talking about. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Watts and let him proceed.
And we're gonna have to unmute you.
Thank you. Bad habit of mine. Thank you, Bob, and thank you all for the chance to participate in this meeting. What I'm going to share, you probably already know, but as a refresher, I'll explain first the answer to the question one, how are taxes collected and deposited in the county treasury. Next slide there, Tony. As you know, we have two major types of taxes, property taxes specifically, that we collect in the county here. And they are, of course, the annual secured property taxes and the annual unsecured property taxes. We collect the secured property taxes twice a year. They're billed out in September, but they are due November 1st and February 1st, delinquent December 10th and April 10th. This fiscal year, as you can see the numbers there, we've sent out 375,000 roughly tax bills for approximately $3 billion. $3 billion. It's quite a large amount. And then annual unsecured taxes, we sent out roughly 43,000 for $75 million. Our collection rate has been fairly good. We average around 92, 93% a year. And of course, whatever is delinquent, we collect over time afterwards, and pretty much collect most, if not almost all, of the tax revenue. There are also monthly supplemental and unsecured bills that go out during the year, depending on the event date that might trigger those bills. But they're a small number. Nevertheless, they're part of the whole picture. Next slide there, Tony. We collect our payments through various means. The most common, of course, is mail. You may have noticed if you are Contra Costa County property owner, when you send in your secure property tax bill, we have a San Francisco PO box on it. And that is because it's sent to the place nearest where our lockbox service with Wells Fargo Bank is located. The whole idea, of course, is to get the money to them as quickly as possible so it's deposited and starts to work for us. If taxpayers don't have a coupon with that address, oftentimes it's because they printed the tax bill off of our website. They will have a Martinez PO box then, and that's where it'll be sent to our office specifically, where we have a back office operation similar to the one in Fremont for the Wells Fargo's lockbox operation. Again, and when we process these payments in-house or over in Fremont, these checks are ACH converted, so the money is drafted from the payer's accounts immediately, overnight, in other words, and into our account the next day. We also offer electronic services for payment. You may have visited our website. If not, I would encourage you to do so and share with your friends. It's cctax.us. There you can look up tax bills if you didn't get it in the mail for whatever reason, and see the full bill, and also be able to make your payment online. And if you don't trust the web yet, you can always make a payment over the phone through our interactive voice response system. But that is currently only for secured. We used to offer that for all other types of taxes, but secured seems to dominate. And from a cost-effective point of view, we decided to just only include secured. And then, of course, we have a lot of people who like to pay in person. They just like to come to our 1901 historical building and walk the halls and come in and pick up the receipt. But unfortunately, as you may have seen, we are temporarily closed to the public except by appointment only, and only for those who are having to pay by cash or multi-tender. Otherwise, people are having to pay the other two means above. And just recently, again, for those people who like to come down to our building and are insistent that they drive all the way from Richmond or wherever they're coming from, so that they don't waste their time driving, we've actually managed to put up an exterior lockbox, or not lockbox, but Dropbox. And that's on our Main Street door where they can go and pay during our regular business hours at a Dropbox. And it is under surveillance, camera surveillance, so it's safe and it's picked up during the day. And then, of course, at night, that box is locked, so nobody can use it. Next slide, please. So, whoops, did we go back? Did we go too far? Go back one, I'm sorry. There we go. So tax payment deposit, this is the last slide I'll address here. The question again was, how do we get the money in the bank? And I mentioned it along the way, It's either by check or cash deposit or by ACH or electronic fund transfer. Once it's deposited, then we do a journal entry to update the general ledger of those payment receipts. And of course, we post the same information to our tax system to reflect the payment. And that is the answer to the first question.
Correct. So now we'll talk about how we actually get it from Mr. Watts' office out to the districts. Go ahead. And so there's, like he said, there's different pieces. We're going to talk about secured, unsecured, and supplemental taxes. The biggest one, obviously, is the $3 billion secured taxes. Unsecured is not teetered, and supplemental is teetered. And let me talk about a little bit about that. There was a alternate method of tax apportionment that was established for the county back in the 50s by Desmond Teeter. So this is named after him. What this does is it allows for the use of funds by districts, and schools being one of them, based on their anticipated property tax revenues to help with their cash flows, because it's secured against property. So with that, we use that for your secured and your supplemental, but because unsecured isn't, it's not part of the teeter plan. Within the teeter plan, we do a thing called an advance account for your taxes. That advance account keeps track of what is on the tax roll and what has been converted to you in a cash conversion. So when you look at your property taxes at the beginning of the year, you'll see the amount of revenues there, but you don't have the cash. And you'll see the amount of the advance that is there. Well, that advance allows you to spend on that advance, even though you don't have the cash for it. And for your cash position related to spending, within the Treasury, we look to see what your cash and your advance are. And as long as you're positive in that sense, we don't see you as a negative in a negative cash position. Periodically through the year, as we collect the taxes and we record them and we get an idea of what that collection is, we actually convert those collections into cash. So we reduce your advance amount and move that into actual cash for the district. So if you've spent down your, what we'll call your TIN or your true cash account, and it happens to be negative, as we put that in, it offsets it and brings it back to hopefully a positive balance. But the two of those work close hand in hand.
So
Mr.
stop
Campbell,
for just a second. I saw.
Yeah.
Can I back you up and walk us through just a little bit and give some explanations before you keep going? Can we go
Sure.
back?
Yep. Back.
Back to it.
Yeah, can we just start here? So tell us, what is a secured versus an unsecured versus a supplemental?
Right. So the assessor's office actually makes the designation, but essentially when you have something that's secured, it's guaranteed against the property. So residential homes, for example, they're secured against their home. So when the taxes are there, if unfortunately the person doesn't pay their taxes, somewhere along the lines, the county through the tax collector's office can take over that property and sell it at public auction to pay the delinquencies that are associated with that property. Well, that delinquency that's sitting there doesn't impact the district because the county takes on the delinquency in that process. So if somebody's not paying their taxes, we still forward to you as part of the teeter plan the taxes related to that particular property. So regardless of payment or not, this allows you to get those tax dollars into your fund so that you can utilize them. And this is what helps smooth out your cash flow process so that you don't have a spike in December and then spend down, and then a spike in April, and then a dry period, because of the teeter plan allows you to spend more regularly, and we don't get them deferred like you do your state payments. So this helps you with your budgeting and planning, knowing that you'll have this amount available for spending throughout the year whether we've converted it to cash or just made it available to you as an advance.
And this is a big deal because not all counties do this. And so some counties are dependent on when those tax revenues come in and can have much faster cash flow problems, especially when there's deferrals from the state.
Okay, so secured is, it's secured by a house, regardless of whether they pay or not. You're giving us a cushion and you're absorbing, people who aren't able to pay. So you're studying our flow.
Yeah.
Do I have that?
Districts.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So now tell me about unsecured.
So unsecured, there's no real property to go and sell at public auction. So it could be, like a boat or something like that where they might go out after it, but it's not real, land or something along those lines. So that we don't teeter that. That is actual collections, and then we apportion that out. So that's a little bit different mechanism.
And then what is supplemental?
Okay, supplemental transactions are those ownership changes or new construction that happen after the lien date of a particular fiscal year. So what the Revenue and Taxation Code allows for the assessor to do is to come in and revalue the property as of that transaction date. And then they say, well, the value of the property has increased, as an example, because of an ownership change, or because they did a remodel and it added value that is now additional tax. We take that supplemental increase in assessed value, apply the tax rate, prorate it based on the number of months that are still available in that tax year, and it creates a tax that is due and payable secured against the property. In general, there are some unsecured supplemental events, but for the most part, they're all secured against the property, either as a new construction or an ownership change. And
Yeah, so in general, on supplemental, it's if my neighbor who bought her house in 1953 sold it and pays $1,200 a year in taxes, sold it, and all of a sudden her bill goes up to $21,000. It's in this supplemental bucket. Is that correct?
that is the first transaction. So on that supplemental, what they do is in the subsequent fiscal year, subsequent January 1 lien date, the assessor's office will take that supplemental event into consideration, reappraise the property based on that, and then that will be their new value going forward, and that will become part of the secured tax roll.
Got it. Okay. And then explain to us what teetered is, because I'm not sure that means anything to me.
So
Means a lot to me.
Yeah, so let me go back a little bit. So back in the 50s, there was a plan called the alternate method of tax apportionment, and that was put into statute, Revenue and Taxation Code, starting at 4701, I believe. And what that did is that allows counties that put them into this alternate method, allows them to forward the proceeds from property taxes to districts that are participating in the Teeter plan. And it gets its name Teeter from Desmond Teeter, who was at one time the auditor controller for Contra Costa County, and developed this method and got it passed by the legislature and put into Revenue and Taxation Code.
And so for us, just to explain it, we get 100 million in taxes. We would normally get 10 million every month. And then I'll let Bob kind of explain from there how much we can actually access the first month.
Yeah. So let's say $100 million, as Tony said, would be your secured taxes. Well, under normal process, you may not see any of that 100 million until closer to December, because that's when taxes get paid. And that's when we would be able to apportion it out to you. The way the Teeter plan works and allows for operations, coming into July, we give you an estimate of what your taxes will be based on the previous year and put that into your advance count, and we put that into your revenue. So you don't really have the cash yet, but we will allow you to draw on that to meet necessary expenses. And that is the real benefit to districts, is because they can draw on that. So
Okay,
you're
so
not,
it's like a line of credit.
that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, it's your line of credit based on your anticipated revenue inflows.
What the
Okay.
County Office of Education calls it is advance on taxes.
Advance
And
on
that's what
taxes.
it's called. It's an advance on taxes. That's the actual name we use in our finance system.
All right, moving to that slide.
Okay. So we have the what we just talked about, the advance account, which is your advance on taxes, and you have one for both regular secured as well as supplemental. And like I said, that's available for you. And then periodically we convert that advance to cash based on collections so that you really get the cash. And at the end of the year, here's the other aspect, and this is where the delinquency piece really comes in. Is let's say we're at 95% collections at the end of the year, which is actually pretty bad. You would normally only get 95% of your available revenue because that's all we've collected for you. The teeter plan allows us to go ahead and pay you the full amount that you would be entitled to off of the tax roll. So you get 100%, and then we would carry the delinquency. Fortunately, the last few years, even with COVID, our delinquency rate has only been around 1% or less. So we have not had an issue with delinquency, and that's countywide. I don't have it specific to the West Contra Costa Unified School District's area, but in general, the countywide has been about 1% or less. So we're guaranteeing you 100% of your tax revenue, and then the county takes on the delinquencies. And at that year end, we fully convert all of your advance to cash, whether it's collected or not. And go ahead to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
And so the objective that we're trying to meet through doing the teeter plan, or the alternate method of tax apportionment, is one, provide a stable revenue stream to the districts with a dependable cash flow, so that you're not getting large infusions at particular points in time and yet having to either do separate trans to meet your cash flow in dry periods. So this creates a much more stable cash flow for you, dependability on when you can make your expenditures, and less reliant on doing other types of temporary borrowings, whether it's outside agencies or inside, because you have this mechanism to ensure that you're able to make your payments. This is also should be a benefit to your creditors, knowing that you have this cash flow guaranteed, so you're not worried about delinquencies. And it should provide them a better understanding in your cash flow that you're able to meet your obligations as it's laid out in a timely fashion. So I believe it really helps the credit of our special districts and school districts here in the county. The next piece is related to general obligation bonds. Now, West Contra Costa has a number of general obligation bonds that are on the tax roll for collection. We actually include your general obligation bonds in the same teeter plan that the 1% property tax is part of. So they go through a very similar process of getting the advance, having that set up, and making those cash conversions available for your bond fund. But really the key for that is that delinquency piece. And that delinquency piece guarantees that the amount that we've calculated for you and you need to make your debt service payment is going to be available for your debt service payment. And that's why I say in there that the bond should be looked at as basically a guaranteed item to be paid, because with us calculating the rate, saying you need X number of dollars, and us working with you to ensure that we're meeting your debt service schedule, you will get the necessary funds to make those debt service payments. So there should be no reason why a lender would come in and rate you down, even if you have economic difficulties, because of the way this works. Now, obviously, if something catastrophic happened, that might impact it. But we're talking things that we haven't seen, maybe levels of 1901 earthquake type of situation, because we have not had a issue of being able to meet these types of obligations in our operations through our, at least for the last 30 years that I've been a part of it. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And before we move on to that, are there any questions?
Nope, looks like we can go on. Wait,
Yeah, we'll get to some questions later. I just wanted to set that level ground because we're talking about pretty dry stuff that, and the point of this is to set a level understanding for everybody. We actually don't talk about a lot of math here. It's really, I try to keep it high level. So
yeah, well, if I put you guys to sleep, that I've done my job. So, okay, well, I'll turn it back over to Rusty now and talk about the borrowings.
All right. So we do offer a temporary transfer program. Actually, it's mandated by law. You'll see there the Article 16 of the California Constitution requires us to make available certain funds on a temporary basis for certain situations. So it wasn't until not too long ago we actually formulated or formalized, I should say, this program, seeing the writing on the wall that our districts were going to need something like this down the road. And so it is available online. If you go to, again, cctax.us, my website, under Treasury and over to Finances, you'll find the entire program there, along with the forms you'll need. I'll talk about in just a minute. But first and foremost, understand that this is a service we're required to offer to pool members, which of course the school districts are. And I've cited here too also the education code sections that also refer to similar language that the Constitution provides there. Next page.
and as we're going, I'm gonna say that 60 days ago, I thought today's presentation was really gonna be because in next week, I was gonna be asking to borrow because the state wasn't gonna give us enough cash. The world changed a little bit,
Thank
but
goodness.
as quick as the world changes, it can change backwards. So we wanted to continue this conversation so that the board and the public understood exactly what we almost had to do. And we came very close. I've had multiple meetings with these gentlemen to get ready to tee this up.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Good to hear that things have gotten better for you. Again, this is a very short-term temporary program. It doesn't replace the trend. Of course, if it's only a short-term temporary need that you have to bridge over, say a couple of months of time, it is the cheapest way to go. It's very simple to apply for. Here are the step-by-step procedures. Basically, you adopt the resolution, or your governing board does, requesting the temporary transfer to cover current expenses of maintenance or obligations. And we have a sample resolution, again, on our website in that packet. And then along with that, a copy of that, you submit a request for temporary transfer of funds and a temporary transfer agreement to the Audit Controller's office and then to my office. It'll go to their office first, and then they'll pass it along to us after they've had their chance to see it. Included with those forms and the resolution is a second interim cash flow worksheet that you should provide. Next page, Tony. After you submit those documents, then the Audit Controller will go through them first and determine the amount that can be transferred based on 85% of the amount of money that would accrue to the district in the fiscal year. And then the Audit Controller will refer that request along with the amount that they've determined to our office. We would then certify whether or not we have the money in the Treasury to match that amount or less, and return it back to the Audit Controller. And afterwards, the Audit Controller will reach back out to the school districts, and in your case, Wisconsin Costa, and let you know. And again, the last paragraph there that somebody's putting the cursor over it and highlighting that this all must be done prior to the last Monday in April. That's statute. So time would be of the essence here to make sure that these forms are submitted, and auditor and treasurer have had a chance to review and certify available funds in order to make this temporary transfer to occur. Last page. And then finally, at some point you have to repay the loan back to us. You'll see that it will come out of the first monies that accrue to the district. The cost, as somebody's quickly highlighting there, I've seen the cursor going back and forth, is really cheap, a really good deal. It's based on the cost would be based on the last quarter earning plus 10 basis points for the financing or cost of this temporary transfer.
So to help everyone understand, what % interest rate would that be to borrow? So that there's context today.
Yeah, well, the last quarter interest earning was 47 basis points, or 0.47%, plus the 10% on top of that. So it's rather good deal.
0.6% interest. That's what we're talking about, being able to use the county for borrowing. So when you think about your own mortgages at 2.7, 4.0, you think about your credit cards at 19%. This is 0.6% in today's world.
Yeah, less than 1%, and only to cover our costs of administering the program. That's really what's there.
That's, yeah, 0.1%. Yeah, exactly. Again, if you were to issue a TRAN, obviously you could borrow for more money, but it's going to cost you more money, and you probably don't need it money for that long. You know, again, this temporary transfer program is ideal for those short-term dry periods that rarely occur, but almost occurred this year. But anyway, that is the temporary transfer program. Again, I refer you to our website. If you want the full detail and you want a copy of the samples, they're there all the time in the event that you need to use them again.
And so as you go into the questions, when the state deferred the money, because they pay more than half of our revenue, we were looking very much at going cash negative by April or May. And then even with the last one at first interim, we thought we were going to go cash negative in June and might have been borrowing for that June period, which meant we would have had to borrow way back in April and hold that money in our accounts and pay the interest on July 1st. As of now, as we've looked at different one-time funds coming through, we will have enough cash to get through the year without borrowing. So we're not bringing the resolution. We thought about bringing it forward, but once you bring it, you're borrowing money for no reason. Even at 0.6, that's still an expense to the district. But we still believe it is important for you to ask your questions now.
Great, thank you so much. President Phillips, would you like to start?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, I have a couple. So first, thank you for the presentation and thank you for being here. One of the goals here is just to, as you know, as we're trying to build community knowledge and board member knowledge, and on really some really difficult topics that are quite can be quite boring to be frank, but are so important, and the way that schools are funded are just, it's just so difficult. And you know,
That just cuts me deep.
I mean,
I don't think it's boring, Bob.
I gravitate to this. I mean, let's admit it's not for everyone. It's not anything, you know, I'm doing my best to make it entertaining. So this is TRAN, T-R-A-N, correct? This is my new favorite was my new favorite acronym for a while.
Well, not this program.
Not this program.
This is, because that's outside external borrowing.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Your TRAN is your tax revenue anticipation note, which is really outside. This is just your statutory borrowing that you allow to do with the county treasurer. So it's a different mechanism,
Okay.
and they should be used for different things and selected differently because they are unique in what they do and what they provide for the district and why the district would need to utilize one or the other.
And I just had Regina leave our cash flow up for no other reason, just so you can see where everything comes in and how the revenues go across each month, instead of us waiting for some of those to come in. And she'll scroll up where you can see all of the revenue on the top
Yeah.
there. That
okay.
what we're really borrowing off of is row 13. That's what the whole teeter is about. That's what we've been talking about here.
Okay, all right, so I got it. So this is not a tran. Okay, so that's helpful. And so so now we feel like today, at this moment, we're good and we're not going to have to,
Borrow.
right?
Right.
Okay.
Even though you see ending cash is negative, we have other funds that have additional that are also in the county treasury. So the aggregate of all funds, if you go to the summary of all funds, Regina, and you scroll over to May or June, I mean, what you'll see is the aggregate, we still have a $20 million interfund balance there, which is above our mandatory 3% that we can utilize without having to do anything. That's why we're not going to the county.
Okay.
And this was a new form that we had done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it.
And Tony, if I recall correctly, you went through each of those available funds to verify their availability to you to use in your cash flow process, correct?
Correct. As we talked about, we are not utilizing any of our bond funds, because that's going to be the first question everyone has, is those bond funds that we talked about that are deemed secure, we keep them firewalled away from operational. So you can see in Building Fund 21, row 16, there's $109 million in June anticipated to be sitting in the county treasury. But when we talk about what's our inner fund balance, we're only talking about 20 million. So by definition, we are not looking at that fund as an option for.
No, and they were very clear on that. They were like, do not.
Yep.
So they recommended that we borrowed instead of going into that, just due to the technicalities. So I appreciated that. So a question for these gentlemen is, as school board members, I mean, you know, we all come with different lenses and different expertises, and not everybody gravitates to this or has the background. So throughout my term here, I very much wanted to build a manual and guidance for not only for us, but for who comes after us, of in this world of school funding, what you need to know and the questions that you need to ask, even if you're, you know, you can look at this from a completely different frame. And so while I have the experts here, for those who come after me, what do I need to know, and what are the questions that I'm going to pass on to who comes after me?
Well, I'll start off, and because I'm going to direct them to the Treasurer Tax Collector's school financing manual, if I recall that correctly. I think that's a great place for anybody related to school management should look at. It gives kind of an understanding from the county's perspective, and I'll let Rusty talk about that a little bit more, since you know it's in his purview.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So our California Association of County Treasurers and Tax Collectors have put together this school finance manual, and is reviewed regularly to update where there are changes in statute. It is available online at our website, at the CACTAC, or California Association of County Treasurer Tax Collectors website as well. But it's there for our benefit as well as our pool participants, specifically our school district's benefit. As you consider borrowing money, what you should know, understand, be aware of how the business of borrowing money and paying it back works. So I would recommend that. Then, of course, this temporary transfer program every county has their own version of a manual for it. This is the manual we put together. I have to confess that we did look at other counties' manuals and probably took the best parts from them and put it into our forms. So it's somewhat representative of what other counties do. But and we've had it vetted by our county council. So it's all good information, legally approved, so to speak, to be, in other words, reliable to use. So I would recommend, if you're going to create a folder for future trustees to go through as part of their training, to include at least those two documents, the school finance manual and the temporary transfer document. Again, they're both online if you want to just refer them to the online. Again, I can't guarantee though, when I leave office, if they'll stay online, if my successor will like them there, or somebody will decide to take them off, I don't know. But I've made them available so that, again, you don't have to call and try to track me down and ask these questions. You can go online anytime you want, in the middle of the day or night, or looking for something to fall asleep with. You know, it's there available 24/7 online.
Okay, great. Oh, good. There it is. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And then how do you interact? How do all of the parties interact with the Contra Costa County Board of Education on these, you know, matters like this? I guess once you start borrowing money, it gets pretty serious, and more than just you three are gonna, you know, weigh in on that.
Well, you know, depending on the avenue that you take, clearly, you know, you go through us, you know, there's a board resolution that we go through. Depending on the school district, we either work with the district or with the Office of Ed, if it's one of the districts that they help, you know, facilitate. And Bill Clark has been a big part of that in years past, and we've worked very close with him and gone and presented to them as well, so that they have this type of information. So they're, I would say, also a good resource. Unfortunately, it's my understanding that Mr. Clark may be retiring pretty soon, which is hard to hear. I was hoping to be able to go out when he does, because you know, working with new people is always challenging, but especially at my age. But you know, that's a good avenue. And then reaching out to us. We are county officers who are charged with county-wide, not just county, but county-wide responsibilities as it relates to special districts and school districts. So we're here to help with the school districts as well, as Rusty is their treasurer and I'm their auditor under statute. We're here to work with you as well. So don't be afraid, and Tony hasn't been, to reach out and ask us questions, and we'll do the best we can to address them, or at least look for resources that can help address those questions, because we're in this together. We're all trying to do the best for our citizens as we can.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't have any other questions. President Phillips, anything else? We can move to public comment.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Okay,
I'm looking for hands. We did so well that there are absolutely no questions. And we do have an audience, so they are listening. So I just wanted, before you go to comments, I really want to thank both Russell and Bob. I had no idea what I didn't know until I started meeting with them earlier this year. And it started with the conversation with Bill Clark that kind of triggered us this way. And they've really educated me on the whole process. Like you saw that summary of all funds, I had never made one like that before. But once I really understood the process because they explained it to us, it helped us to refine our work. And so the fact that they both would come over here today and do this, I really just wanted to thank them personally and professionally for everything. And then I'll pass it back to you, Trustee.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for being here, and thanks for your help. I mean, certainly this was unprecedented, and it was really scary for a while. So we are we're definitely on better ground now for sure. And I'm very happy that we don't have to borrow money for sure. That's great. Every day, we might have to tomorrow, depending on, and it's totally out of our control. It's like, okay, the state has this, state has this, federal government does this. It's like every day it's different. So it's very hard to understand and communicate that when you're in such a, unprecedented time. But I really thank you for helping us. And I thank you for being here. And look at all that we learned today about tutor program, learned a little bit about taxes.
I would just like to add that the staff at the county treasurer's office and auditor has been extremely supportive and helpful to the business office at West Contra as well. We deal with them in the business office quite a bit, and I've always had great response from everyone there as well, including our business office staff from Belinda and just so many different people there. So again, Russell and Bob, thank you very much. I know our staff really appreciates it too. You guys are always available and ready to help us and support us every single time. So thank you.
Well, that's
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that it's just so clear that there's a web that supports us. I mean, we're not out here on ourselves, that it's actually a very intricate web of people that are working on this. And that is not always visible for sure. So, I mean, we are not doing this alone. And there's a lot of people that weigh in and give advice and hold us as we walk through this. So, it's invisible to most people, even to board members, but, there really is a supportive network. So I thank you very much for that, for sure. Anything else on this item?
I think before we go, I guess I need to apologize to the translator, because even though it's dry, I get kind of excited, and I guess I was going too fast. So my apologies. I'll try to remember for next time.
Yeah, I'd also like to mention that translating this is very difficult, because if you don't have this
Terminology.
this terminology and financial information, it's really tough. So
Yeah.
Thank you to Ms. Brown. Yay! This is a tough one today. Okay, great. Well, thanks very much. I really appreciate you being here, and thanks for holding us.
Wasn't sure if Trustee Phillips had anything to finish with.
Yeah, I thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Watts and Mr. Campbell. This is, and everybody said it already, but this is an extremely trying time. And it's really important now more so than ever that agencies are able to collaborate and to work effectively together, like Ms. Weber was just talking about, because there really is a system. And when you begin to see the parts moving, that's when you really begin to see, the system. And I think sometimes we don't recognize that until there's an emergency, right? It's like nobody thinks about the toilet until it stops working. And that's really kind of the situation that, local governments, not just school districts, but cities have been in as well. So I too just wanted to say, thank you very much for the support that you've given, that your departments have given the district now and in the past, and do value the relationship. So thank you too for coming and spending an afternoon with us. And Dr. Wolf, thank you very much for inviting us.
You're welcome.
So as we move to the next item, if Russell and Bob, if you just log off, we're not going to be offended.
All right.
Okay. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you. Have a
Bye.
good weekend. Okay, next up, 2B,
So-
discussion on one-time funding.
So I'm going to bring up another shared screen, and with all of the different conversations, we thought it might be beneficial to go a little deeper on all these different one-time funding. What is CARES Act? What is ESSER? What is Lost Learning Funds? What are this? What are that? And so we tried to put together everything that we have had go through in previous meetings, and I'm going to try to walk through it really quickly for the trustees on what is all of our one-time fundings and what does one-time mean, if that'll help. And so really, it starts with what has been happening with our budget? Why do we need reserves? What is our budget built on? What is the ongoing money? And why do I keep talking about a structural deficit when there's millions of dollars coming in from different sources? So this is the first reason why. And we've talked about this in open session before. This year and next year, we're getting paid on our enrollment and our ADA from pre-pandemic. We don't know what our enrollment next year will be. We don't know what the percentages are going to be. We did an amazing job to get applications in for free and reduced lunch, to get our percentage actually up from 70.5% to 71%. But you can see as of January, our ADA percentage this year, significantly because of vaccinations, regular ones like Tdap and things like that in 7th grade, was lower at 91%. If that trend were to continue, that would play into less ongoing revenue for the district beginning in 22-23. Other things that we know, and I was in a meeting today where Barrett Snyder, who works for Capital Advisors, was talking about different scenarios and that this has not changed yet. So while everything sounds great about revenue for the state, and you can see that the state is still projected 15 billion more than they thought in the current, 6 billion in the current year, 15 billion for next year. The following year, they're still showing multiple deficits in a row. And so it's not 7.5 and then it's only a billion more. It's they get 7.5 less than they thought. Then the next year they get another 8.5 less. So it adds on top of itself and you quickly run out of cash and revenue across the state. So this is still where the state's projections are. There is a cliff potentially coming and it's just around the corner. You can't quite see it, but it's coming. And this is what we were talking about with the ADA. If we don't have enrollment increase next year, you go to that far right and you see all of a sudden what you thought you were getting isn't there, and that cliff is right around the corner. So we know that reserves are going to be very important. And even while you get one-time money, you cannot spend that on something that you're going to have to buy again the next year and the next year when the one-time money's gone. We also know these expenses are not going away. And while they continue to change a little bit, you can still see that we have to pay for every dollar that we pay in salary to a classified employee. We're putting another quarter into PERS. 5 years ago, we were paying a dime. So that's the best way to explain how fast it's increased for the same service. STRS, same exact deal. When you go back, we used to be paying at a much lower rate, the 8%, and we're sitting around 17%. Maybe it'll drop, maybe it won't. It keeps changing back and forth. So those are ongoing expenses that we know of. There's also, because of the way the income came in, there will be a cap on reserves. Anything that is in the unassigned or assigned portion of the budget must be less than 10%. If it is committed for a specific purpose, that does not count. And our board has that resolution, and we're restoring Fund 17 to have 9% reserves, which means that Fund 1, once we cross 1% in Fund 1, we're at that 10% threshold. So there's this huge cliff coming, but there's this rule that says you can only keep 10%. All government recommendations are to have 17%. So we continue to look at different options, refunding our OPEB and pieces like that. Knowing that things aren't going to matter, we have all those reserve caps. It brings us to the one-time monies. So what did the one-time monies do for us? And then we'll go to the actual formula of them. We were making significant cuts. Back 1 year ago today, this board passed a resolution to lay off 200 certificated employees. Well, not this board, but the Board of Education. had to pass a resolution that laid off and eliminated 200 certificated positions between management and teachers. Followed right up with a reduction of classified, administrative, and other support positions. We've restored the vast majority of those. And there may be a couple more that we're still working on. And the way we did that is we received one-time CARES Act. We were able to bring back some services, even though we have a deficit. We will be able to use ESSER 2, which I'll talk about in a little bit, to maintain those positions for another year. And then ESSER 3, which we'll talk about in a little bit, will maintain them for another year. But we can't keep adding back with those one-time monies, because what they're doing is they're maintaining and sustaining things as we're waiting for the state to get its act together, hopefully. Without those funds, we would not have been able to buy all the PPE, personal protection equipment, that we're buying. And every day I am approving 50,000, 100,000. We're into the millions of dollars that we're spending for these one-time monies for safety. We would not have been able to maintain and upgrade our technology. We've received dollars that we will be able to use to fully ensure that our classrooms have the necessary technology, whether it be display boards, whether it be voice amplification systems, the Chromebooks that students have in their hands, all of those different pieces of connectivity that's necessary. That came because we had one-time funding. Other things we're going to be looking at through the facilities committee is security. Is there additional security needed, whether it be cameras or other pieces? That's what one-time dollars are supposed to be used for, is to make permanent investments that will make a difference. We've also invested tremendously in staff development. Spent the entire year on Fridays focused on race and equity to work on the beginnings of changing the inherent culture and the inherent structural biases that had been in place in this district for many years. And 1 year is not enough. The good news is we have several more years of one-time money. We can continue that work with the hope of permanently changing the way we interact with each other, changing our hiring practices to continue to bring more and more employees that are representative of the students we serve, and making investments in technological infrastructure and data and pieces like that. So that's what the one-time dollars have done. They've really allowed us to continue to provide those services, kept nutrition services going. We're getting close to 14 million meals in 1 year. We're now 100% organic food every Thursday is being distributed. It's tremendous, some of the things we've been able to do that were new and different. So this was the first time. This was our CARES Act that we received. We received 34 million. They were in very different names. So ESSER is the Elementary and Secondary Education Reform Act. That one was what we use for our school sites to maintain their funds as we go forward. We also had SB 117, which was personal protection. That was straight from the state. GEAR, CRF are both the same thing. Those were the CARES Act, just different names for them. This is where we maintained a lot of our employees. This is how we funded our staff development this year as we go forward. And so you can see how the 34 million was spent. Of this, in ESSER 2, which I'll talk about in a moment, about half of these services will immediately be paid for with ESSER 2. So when you start going, oh, we got all this new money, it's actually paying for something we did this year so we can continue to do it next year. And then we'll use ESSER 3 the following year. So as people start to add, they go, oh, that's extra. No, that takes off a piece of what this year's was so that you don't have to get rid of it. So that's the same slide. I apologize. So we know right before the election or before the inauguration, the federal government passed ESSER again, and that will provide $24 million to us for next year. So remember, this year we got 34 million. Next year we get 24 million. That 24 million is going to cover the same expenses as we did this year, because otherwise we would have had to eliminate all of that going forward. And many of those services are still needed, as are those people. We're expecting more. We know that we're going to get ESSER 3 in a minute, but there's still a move to increase Title I funding for our most at-risk students. There is a push to increase the number of psychologists and counselors. You cannot buy people with one-time money. So we're hoping that there'll be some ongoing federal investment. We're hearing federal government paying their full share of special ed. Currently, our special education expenses are just under $90 million. The federal government gives us $7.5 million. The state gives us $17 million. So combined, we receive $25 million, but we pay $9 million. So if the federal government were to pay their share more appropriately, maybe that's $10 million more that we wouldn't be paying for the services we already have, which would provide additional resources to support our school district. And so that's where people have to understand that when one-time monies come in, you have to make sure that you've covered the other pieces as you go. So that's ESSER 2. So this was just announced. The $1.9 trillion investment in America that was just announced by the federal government will give us at least $50 million that we can use for the 22-23 all the way to September of 2023. So while the dollars will come in increments and you have to spend it to get it, we expect that this is not for right now and not for next year. We have ESSER 2 for next year. This is for the third year. And if you don't space it out, you end up with that cliff that I just showed you in 22-23. If that happens and we're spending these $50 million early, we're going to have immediate and catastrophic reductions in services. So part of it is having a very structured plan to sustain what we're doing that we believe is essential, and then add on appropriately for those services. In addition, back in February, the governor came out with what he was hoping to do for his quick jumpstart. This converted to AB 86, which will, if met, potentially provide the district with funds for a spring reopening. That's a whole other conversation as we go on, but that's one time, and it's very short-lived money for a very small period of time. It's in, it's out, it's gone. What isn't in and out and gone is the piece right here, the expanded learning grants. For us, that's approximately $20 million. We know that we'll receive that, and we've already announced our summer plan. The summer plan will be in person, small cohorts, credit recovery at the high schools, very significant focus K2 at the elementaries, then moving to other grades based on need. There, we're anticipating spending a bulk of that $20 million for that summer program, with the remainder for our design for fall as we build the best possible model to get everyone back within the capacity of our organization for fall, direct in-person instruction. So that's helping us augment getting through fall as we transition out of the restrictions we've had into the business that we used to do, knowing that school will never be the same. It'll be slightly different. We do have that one-time funding to support that. And so these are all different pieces we talk about on instruction as we go forward. The state did increase the cost of living. That cut our structural deficit from 25 to 28 million down to between 12 to 15 million. And with the one-time monies, we're able to push that structural deficit out several years, but it's still there. And until the state basically doubles the COLA again, we're still going to have issues on those out years. And so back again, this is just showing the federal government, 24 million coming through, all the CARES Act to go through. You can see in this slide here from the second interim, how the one-time monies get dropped into the budget and where they go. And you can see that we still need to recognize that 390 to 400 million is our spending with these one-time monies, but our revenue is at the 370 range. So we have to ultimately have a plan by 23-24 to have our expenditures down at the 370, 380 mark, not at the 400. We're spending more because we have the one-time funds, but we have to make sure that that more doesn't continue to breathe and eat and need to be funded, because we don't want to get into the layoff piece. The district has restored our Fund 17 up to the 9%. The district will replace the OPEB, meaning that we will have 2 years for OPEB retirees in that Fund 71, keeping us protected. But that, as we know, can go very, very fast, because all of that restoration that we're doing, we lost it in just 1 year, not even 12 months ago. So we have to know that everything is quick, everything is fast. And so while there is a lot of one-time money, and it allows us to be innovative, it allows us to be focused, it allows us to do excellent additional services for students, we do need to make sure that we're doing it with the right lens in mind. And so I think I'm going to stop there. There's several other different slides in here that we can go through, but that should give kind of a foundation of one-time monies and hopefully a little more clarity as we go forward. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you. President Phillips, would you like to start?
Please. Dr. Wold, do you recommend that we spend one-time money on permanent employees?
No.
Would you
So
recommend?
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, no, I don't believe we should hire more permanent employees, is what I meant to say.
And that's what I meant to ask.
Yeah.
Do you believe that we should spend one-time money to hire additional permanent employees?
And the answer is no, I do not.
Would you recommend any agreements to the board that requires the board to spend one-time monies to hire additional permanent employees?
No, the only agreements I recommend is where you're using monies that are designated for specific purposes regarding employees. Other than that, no.
And what do you mean by monies that are designated?
So for example, in AB 86, a portion of it is dedicated for specific service employees there that may require the increase of hours or the increase in the number of positions for a period of time. And in that case, because there is a service connected to it, I would make that recommendation, and any of those hires that would be done with notification that should the funding at some point go away, or should the need go away, there would be a resolution to reduce those services in the future.
A period of time is not permanent though, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
So help me understand.
So it's kind of a nuance of labor law. Labor law and finance do not align very well. The way contracts are designed, we're not able to legally say you have a 9-month contract. With very small exceptions, we can. So sometimes you end up having to hire somebody and then know that in 2 years, you're going to have to pass a resolution to reduce service in that area. And so it is a hiring, knowing that there's another action, but you budget and you plan on doing both actions from the beginning.
But didn't you just say in your presentation that you don't do that exactly because you don't want to do layoffs?
Right,
later?
You don't do that unless you are statutorily required. So in AB 86, there are some statutory requirements to do hiring. That is, so it is a condition of receiving the money. The legislature, this is part of the challenge with our legislature, They have written multiple laws that have they have required school districts to hire people with one-time money, and they have required school districts not to lay off people when they have no money.
Did the legislature require people to hire? Did the legislature require districts to hire people permanently?
Well, they required you to hire them, but they have other laws that they forgot to tell anyone about that don't allow you to hire temporary. So the answer is yes, they did require you to hire people and then take the necessary action in subsequent years.
So they required, what you're telling me is they required you to hire permanently.
Yes,
So you don't have any option to hire substitutes.
we do not.
That's against the law.
That is against the law.
Okay. The one-time monies that are coming in for the fall, what are those monies intended to be used for?
To provide services to help assist students transition back to in-person learning and address those gaps and issues that may have occurred due to the time that they've been out.
What would it mean for us to spend? We just got finished talking about advances and teeters and all that kind of stuff. So what would it mean for us to use or take an advance on monies that are supposed to be spent in the fall to use those monies now in the spring? How would that affect us in the fall?
It would limit the amount of services that we would be able to provide in the fall. And part of the challenge, and we've kept in the budget an amount of money because we don't know what we don't know about some of our students until you physically see them and can assess the impacts. We know what we see when we talk to them over Zoom. We know what we see when they turn in work, but we don't know every aspect of what might have changed in their life. And so you want to have funds to be able to address those needs.
Do we need the monies that are supposed to come in the fall? Do we need those monies for the fall?
I believe we do need money for summer and fall. And that's what that 20 billion or 20 million was for those two pieces. Yes.
So do you recommend using the money for the fall in the spring?
No, I believe that we should use money that's intended for the spring and make sure that we meet any requirement in the spring to obtain that money and spend it at the time it's supposed to be spent.
Would you recommend to the board any agreement that required the board to use fall money in the spring?
And so my recommendation would be that the agreements I'll recommend to the board are ones that will ultimately obtain the spring money and are built on obtaining the spring money.
Different question. I'm sure that your agreements that you would recommend to the board are built on hoping that that happens. But would you recommend to the board any agreements that potentially require the board to use monies that were meant for the fall in the spring?
As a matter of best fiscal practice, you want to only spend money that is guaranteed.
Would you recommend? So I don't want to ask like 10 times because
No, I know the question.
Happy place, and I don't want to make this not her happy place.
No,
so
I recognize the question.
Okay, so if you just answer it, we can move on.
What I will recommend to the board is something I believe will only be using spring money. While it's not a guarantee at the moment, I do believe that what I recommend to the board is based on and will be paid out of one-time spring money. So I would not bring an agreement that I don't think will ultimately be qualified for that money.
So you believe that any agreement that you bring to the board will not require us to use any fall money in the spring?
Correct.
And what percentage are you likely or believe that that is the case?
I am never going to say I'm at 100%, but I am more confident than I am not that
That
we
could
will
be
meet.
55%.
Okay,
What
I will
percentage are
go.
you at?
I will go at. As I sit here today, I'm well over 80% confident that we will qualify for the spring monies.
You're well over 80%.
Yeah, I'm over 80% confident that we will qualify for the spring money.
And if we don't qualify for the spring money,
Then we just gave up some additional services for fall.
how much additional services?
Would be approximately $5 million worth of services if we did not qualify. And we will know that before we end the month of, we will know in May whether or not that's a challenge.
And those services, those $5 million of services, actualize that for me. And what I mean by that is, $5 million worth of service buys us what? What are we
So
risking?
I'll put it in the simplest terms I possibly could. That could be 50 teachers that could be used for, there's teachers you can hire on a 1-year temporary contract. So $5 million is equal to 50 teachers that we could hire for the fall for one time. I don't know if that's the simplest calculation to give for the public to understand.
That's pretty simple. So spending fall money in the spring, or risking the ability to spend risking an agreement that may require us to spend fall money in the spring could mean that, and I know it's just not teachers, but I'm just going to go with your analogy. It could be anything. It could be counselors, right? It could be custodians. But what you're telling me is we would, if we were to enter to an agreement that required us to spend fall money in the spring, we could run the risk of losing the ability to purchase 50 teachers in the fall.
Correct. And so I would believe that any agreement that we enter into, there would be a significant motivation to ensure we receive spring money.
And if we don't,
then that's the risk that you just described, that we would not be able to make additional decisions for fall. We would be limited to what our ongoing support budget is.
but you're telling me that we need additional because we don't know what these kids are coming back from and how
Yes.
they're coming back
I believe that we need to add services for the fall. Yes.
to be successful, correct?
Yes, I believe that it is necessary to add additional service, including staff, for the fall.
And you believe that it's okay to risk not being able to do that by entering into an agreement that could cause us to use that fall money in the spring. You believe that's okay?
I believe that everyone, and when I say everyone, I mean the entire educational community, needs to be motivated to provide services for our students to make that eligibility. And that I certainly would hope that everyone sees the same thing I'm saying, that we need to be able to do both.
That is a different question. Do you believe it is okay? And if you just say yes, no, I don't know, I'm not sure, I'll leave you alone, I promise. Do you believe it is okay for us to risk to enter into an agreement that for the spring that potentially requires us to spend fall money, knowing that that could mean we can't fund additional services for kids that you know and believe in your heart that they need? And those services could include, say, 50 teachers. You believe that that's okay? I'm not asking about the entire educational community. I'm asking my chief budget officer if he believes that that's okay.
I'm going to say that I don't know, because
I'll leave you alone.
yeah,
I'll take that.
I'm going to say
I'll
I
take
don't
that.
know.
I'll take that. I'll leave
And
you
that's
alone.
because I cannot say unequivocally yes, and I cannot say unequivocally no. I can't go either way. So I'm going to say I don't know.
So my last question then, I'm gonna If you don't know, why would you recommend something like that?
Because I believe that we need to serve students now, tomorrow, and next year. And I believe that we need to be motivated to all add and continue to add services. So from that sense, I believe we've got to move forward. But to answer your first question, I don't know, but I do know that we can't sit aside and not focus on our kids.
Can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
Everything is weighted, everything is relative, right?
Mhm.
Everything is relative. So like big gain, big risk. Let's talk about like stocks. Big gain, big
Mhm.
risk, right? Little gain, little risk. Do you believe it's worth it to risk that stuff that we just talked about in the fall, the 50 teachers for, let's say, an after school program?
I think we need to keep adding more services to students. So I believe that the more we get kids back onto campus, every kid that we get back, the next day we're going to get another kid and another kid and another kid. And so I believe we need to start. Do I believe that anything that we're agreeing to is the ideal solution? No, I don't. I believe there's a lot more that we need to do. But I also believe that everything is progressive and everything builds on top of each other. So I do believe in taking risks, but the risks that I take are about service for kids. And while I may not agree with everything there, and I always want more services, I
Right.
want more, and I'm going to continue to advocate for more.
Right, but I'm just like
Yeah.
putting things in context. So like let's say big gain, big risk, like would it be worth it if the kids were at school during the school day?
I think the more we can get students services, the better. I know that we are limited in lunch service and a couple things that is a challenge that continues to get better. And so for me, I believe we've got to start somewhere, but we can't say that that's enough
Okay.
because it's not.
So this risk is worth it if we were gonna say put on an after school program.
I
That's
think
what
it's
you
a
believe.
start.
I know it's a start. I'm asking you if you think the risk you just described to me, not being able to fund 50 teachers in the fall, do you believe that risk is worth putting on an after school program? That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk fiscally, just money.
Just say, I don't know. So
Yeah. I'm going to say this. I believe we are going to get.
She just gave you an out. Just say I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're smiling. I'm smiling.
Yeah,
you dancing. Just tap out. Pretend this is UFC and just tap out, and we'll move on.
You know, if this were a cell phone, I'd say I'm in a tunnel at this point. Yeah.
I'm done. Treasury Rec Live asked my questions. Thank you.
Wednesday's going to be really fun.
Yeah, I'll get a better answer by
Get
Wednesday.
the battle gear on now for Wednesday.
Like I said, I believe we're going to get the funding. To put plain and simple, I don't believe we're going to end up sacrificing fall. I think, and we're going to have the best summer we've ever had, and we're going to get better every day. And that, to me, is what I believe. I also believe we're not getting everything that everyone wants yet. It's a process. But I'm also very optimistic in Pollyanna and believe that we're all in it for the right reasons. So that's my commentary.
Roger that. I'm done.
Okay, so I do have some questions, and where are we on time?
Our next one I can cut way short, so we're fine.
No, we're okay on time. Can we go back to that presentation and can you
Absolutely.
Can you go by page?
Tell me what slide you want.
Just go back all the way to the beginning.
Okie doke.
Okay, we can just go one forward. Go up to your. Keep going. All right, there. So, I've talked about attendance several times. I am really concerned about attendance. What is the state's plan, or how close are we going to be held to this attendance number, and what are we building in to get students?
So we are starting to really focus on building programs. When we close the books this year, we will be putting some money aside to plan and implement several academies. We are investing in the International Baccalaureate and other places. So we're going to
I want to
continue.
get it. I want to get even deeper than that. I'm talking about kindergarten kids coming back. I'm talking about our big gaps. Pre-K and K was a big gap, 7 and 9, and the El Cerrito family.
So my perfect answer on that, that's where that 20 million that we talked about, that's that one-time money for the summer and fall, we are going to put an enormous emphasis in really trying to get those kindergarten students into summer so that we can basically jumpstart them, especially the ones that didn't come this year, to school, to get them back in and start refocusing the idea on kinder. Back to Mr. Phillips just sent me down a rabbit hole of 50 teachers. Well, I'd love to hire some extra ones in that K and 1 to lower the class size next fall to really focus on their needs. And I think the more we get that message out and we get that collaborative connection, the more we can start connecting those kids in.
So who is responsible for the marketing plan that is going to ensure that pre-K, K, 7, 9, and El Cerrito families are in the house?
So our director of communications, Bobby Jordan, and our cabinet, we've been talking exactly about that. We are going to be bringing to the board some ideas. We're probably going to ask President Phillips at some point for a study session to get into really best practices and ideas that we can all rally the community around towards that goal.
Okay, so the only way we get paid is by butts and chairs.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, so attendance and building attendance is of utmost importance, especially coming back from this. How are you guys looking at the current baby bust that the pandemic has created, and how demographically are you looking at its effect? Because that is right around the corner. There were at least 500,000 fewer children born this year alone. I don't know what our percentage is, but we're going to get hit with that in some way, shape, or form, and it's going to show up in 3 years.
So I believe in the next couple of years, we need to build ourselves up to be a destination district. In the Friday letter, I didn't have time to put it in here, but I'm putting it in there. We took a look at the last 4 years of inter-district transfers, students leaving the district and students coming into the district, and it is a 10-to-1 ratio out. That right there is your issue that you've got, and I'm not talking about charters. This is going to other districts. And those are all, once you get one, you get it renewed every year. So it's not 1,000 kids every year. It's the same kids for 13 years. So you will see that by schools. So you'll see what school should they be at and what school are they going to. That will help us to target those specific communities to start really focusing on what is it that they are looking for that we're not providing, and we provide that, and we take care of our own kids. That's our job. And we aren't doing that enough. So that's where I start. I don't worry about the birth rate. I worry about just taking care of the kids that are already in my neighborhood that aren't coming to us.
Well, there's going to be a dip though. So I'm asking, in addition to all of that, and I believe that's a great backup plan, but demographically, what is the plan to identify? And this is right around the corner. This is not tomorrow. We
Right.
offer pre-K programs. So if they're not born now, this shows up in 3 years. So this is like a really it's really important. And apparently being down 500,000 births, that's a big deal. From what I've heard, out in the world. It doesn't sound like a lot to me, but it's huge. So
Yeah, it's significant. When you're looking at 5 to 7% drops in a 1-year birth rate, that can have significant ramifications for 13 years of education. So we are already beginning the behind the scenes review of our enrollment patterns, our boundaries, because while we're having that impact certain schools, we're having other schools where there's significant construction and growth. And so part of the conversation is how are our students distributed? How do we need to address our facilities? Where do we need to start making strategic adjustments to not all of a sudden be way overstaffed? And all of those things are part of our demographic work next year.
okay, the next question is, what is the plan to what's the plan to make every parent in this district fill out the free and reduced lunch form?
So we did a much better job this year of outreach. We learned quite a bit about how to get them connected. We now understand the value of that. We're going to continue to try to get all parents to educate it. Now that we're at over 71% and we only had a couple thousand that did not participate to fill out the form, we're working to get a better technology so you can quickly access the pieces. We're doing more direct certification. And I think we're starting to do a better job to help people see the connection. That this is what happens when we did our budget allocations this year to our schools. Some schools went up this year in their supplemental allocations only because they went and received and returned all of those forms. They now know that there's a new set of motivation to keep that focus. So I think we just got to keep that communication that this makes a difference for your kid in your school right now.
Okay, I'd like to see that systematized.
Yes.
I mean, these are two things that are vitally important to us, and we need to have our arms around them, and I don't feel we do. So if that means a truancy officer or like old language or like whatever,
It's student information.
these are the levers.
Basically, you're talking about that focus.
We own
yes.
these levers.
Mhm.
We own these. No one else owns these. We own these. Really
I
good
can tell you
systems.
we're working on that. We were going to bring a proposal as it pertains to our student information gathering and collection and coordination. We have multiple people responsible, but nobody with the keys. And so we need to put somebody directly in that role to lead that and coordinate that and systematize it. So I believe the board will see before the spring is over some plans on gaps that we've identified within our organization.
Yeah, and then I'll save this for comments, but we need a board dashboard on major indicators to run our business. I've held back on that because we're in the crisis, but there are indicators that we should be getting every week. Attendance, like on and on and on, the key indicators that drive business, but I'll save that. Okay, next one.
Okay, next slide there is right.
Okay, I'll go up to go one back to number 5.
Okay.
So I know we had this big discussion with Mr. Clark last week and all of this. So we are required to cover this, correct?
Yes, we have to be prepared that if this happens and the state doesn't give us funding, what are we going to do?
Okay, so we have to do this.
Yes.
But we have a choice as to how much to do, is that correct?
How much to save or?
Yeah.
Yes, we have control over the percentage of reserves we maintain. The rule of 10% has to do with unassigned, but the board already addressed that with your direction to me prior to second interim to commit 20 to 24 million in additional reserves towards that and to restore Fund 71. If we get additional resources, I would bring back to the board a recommendation to continue to fund that OPEB trust, because that becomes an emergency lifeline when you're starting to drown. And so I believe that you always have to have a balanced approach. You don't save every dollar. You have to spend dollars for supporting students today, but you don't also put everything in. You have to have a balanced approach to both.
Okay. And then the other questions I have are on one-time funds, because
Yes.
we're running a little short on time. I do have other questions, but I want to save them. So on these one-time funds, what do other districts do? Do any other districts hire with one-time, or?
Every district that has done that in the past and ends up having to make double the cut in the future, because they end up caught expecting it year over year. And so again, everything's a balance. But if you hire multiple staff members with ongoing funds, I'm going to go to a simple slide to explain it. And I think this slide explains what you have to balance. And Regina will know exactly where I'm going, because we talk about this all the time. This one right here. In the end, this number needs to equal that number. You can have the numbers be off if you're using one-time funds that go in and go out, but that next year you have to say, what is it going to be like here? And so that's the important question. When do those one-time funds end? And do you have a plan? And you can hire people as long as it's clear that there's going to be a resolution in 2 years to reduce that number of positions.
I mean,
So
is that
it's
a
not-
is that a horrible thing to do?
Sometimes no. The reality is, as much as we are a people organization, we are first and foremost a service organization for students. If we need to increase services for a period of time because we have the ability to do so, and then reduce them, we just need to be very directed at it and very clear from the beginning what we're doing. Because too often, school districts are not clear to say, we're going to hire, to use Mr. Phillips' example or my example of 50 teachers. We need to say, in this resolution, we are authorizing to hire 50 teachers that are temporary for 2 years. On the 3rd year, this board is already certifying we are going to do a resolution to reduce that number of positions. And here's why. That's, in my mind, that's an acceptable action because you're focused on kids with the service. What's not acceptable is hire 50 teachers with no expectation they're ever going to go away if you know you don't have the money. And so that's the nuance of it. We can talk a lot about how do you message that, because that's the challenge in these worlds.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Okay, that's all right. I'm going to call it quits for right now because we're running short on time. I do have other questions, but it's also 5 o'clock and I'm sick and I'm just done for this week. So President Phillips, do you have any other questions that you want to ask?
I do. Dr. Wolf, you may not be able to answer this question, but if you are, great. If you're not, just please find the answer.
Sure.
So I'm looking at AB 86 on a different screen,
Mhm.
and AB 86 has different definitions for in-person instruction. It has different definitions for supplemental instruction. Um, and it has different definitions for support. So for example, like support says support means interventions provided as a supplement to those regularly provided. In-person instruction in this definition says means instruction under the immediate physical supervision and control of a certificated employee of the local educational agency while engaged in educational activities required of the pupil. So I'm taking required of the pupil to mean during hours that the pupil is required to be at school, right?
Yes.
And is it accurate that our pupils are required to be at school from 10 to 2?
10 to 3. Office hours are included for required. While it may rotate around, that last hour is indeed part of their day.
Okay, is that the case for elementary school students too?
Yes, all students.
Okay. But from 2 to 3, they may not actually be engaged with the teacher. Is that accurate?
It rotates.
Okay. But 3 to 4 is not part of the school day, correct?
That's supplemental.
Okay. So what I want you to find out is, does the statute require, because it has these different definitions, does the statute require the in-person learning to be during the normal school hours? And please look at the statute and please contact counsel or whoever you need to, because I would hate for us to be doing supplemental. And you just said that we would be, right? So 3 to 4, if we were doing something from 2 to 4, 3 to 4 is supplemental. But I would hate for us to be required to do in-person instruction during normal school hours, and then us not be doing in-person instruction during normal school hours. So what ends up happening is that we did not meet the requirements of the statute, because during the normal school hours, we were actually doing supplemental. Does what I'm saying make sense?
I understand the question, and I'm going to research the answer to make sure that I provide the direct answer to your question.
Please do so. I'm going to send you the section so you could see
Yes.
the definitions. And like, again, I'm just going to say this. It says while engaged in this in person, while engaged in educational activities required of the pupil.
Yes.
And so that means, and you said it, that means during normal school hours, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if we're not doing that during normal school hours, do we blow the money? Because
Right.
that's what the statute says.
Right. No, I understand. And 2 o'clock is normal school hours. I do know
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right, 2 o'clock, but if we were to enter into an agreement that was at, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna stop. Please research it.
Yes, sir. We will.
Okay, I don't have any further questions. I do have some comments, and we'll go to public comment.
Okay. So it's public comment now, correct? And I do not see any hands. So we're to board comments.
Okay. Okay, well, there's a lot here, and I have more. I'm sorry we ran out of time on this because I've got a lot. The first one is obviously getting our arms around attendance and free and reduced lunch. Those are levers that we alone can control, and that is super important, especially right now. And then I do have some comments about how the board is going to weigh on how these one-time funds are spent. And so I think there does need to be a thoughtful discussion about where we weigh in and how we're approving those plans.
Mhm.
And if it's approved as separately than the regular budget, or how do we concurrently approve the budget and approve concurrent one-time funds, I think is important. So
I can answer that really fast. We have to do a supplemental plan that's due June 1st.
oh, all right, there we go.
So
Okay, thanks.
that will be part of our work.
Okay. The other comment is that, we are 90% people. We are a relationship business. We're a people serving business. And to think, it's really kind of weird about this one-time money. To think that we could do this without people is like bonkers. I mean, that's what we do. So, balancing that and figuring that out, I think is going to be important. And then finally, I always keep this little thing about how to talk about structural deficits. And so I'm really glad for this communications person to come on, but I'd like this built like immediately, because I think this will help people really understand what a structural deficit is. So I've sent this before, and I think this would be very helpful to explain. I love this. This is like the greatest thing. So keep that, and I'd love to see that. I'm probably going to come back to you on some more of this. It was a lot, and I'm not at 100% today, but that's okay. I think that's it for this. President Phillips, any comments on this?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, let's move to Figma review very quickly, and then we could be done.
And I can do this very quickly. I'm going to share my screen one more time and just show you really fast the correct one. Let's see here. Which one is it? Might help if I can find the right. I'm going to unshare my screen so I can find the right tab here. Just one moment. The challenge of having so many tabs open is you can never find the one you're looking for in time there. So bear with me for just one moment. Maybe it's over here. Ah, that's why I couldn't find it. Wrong form. Okay. At the second interim, we did move to a positive certification. However, the last 3 interims before that, we were at qualified. Once you've had 3 qualified, that triggers Figma to do a fiscal health risk analysis review of the school district. This is a tool they use where they come in and they actually go through and they will analyze all of our different district systems. I'm actually rather excited to have them take a look at validate some of the areas we've been working on. So we did put this in the packet today. They will look at our audits. They will look at our budget development. How do we do all of those pieces? They will take a look at our budget monitoring. What are our processes and procedures in place? They will look at cash management, how we deal with charter schools, what we do with contributions and transfers such as special ed and other funds. Are we deficit spending? How are we addressing our employee benefits? So I'm just kind of scrolling really quickly because we don't have a lot of time. Our attendance and enrollment, you just said that's a focus. You can see it's a large focus in their analysis of our data, our facilities, our reserves, how we're maintaining those, our general fund status, our information systems and data management. This is a big area for us that we need to continue to invest in. And our next budget meeting, I'd like to bring some more on that. Continuing down to the bottom, internal controls, leadership and stability. So you can see the first 2 questions. If any of these are a no, that instantly triggers concern. And in both cases, they have changed. So that is always an area that Figma's going to be watching. Do we meet to go through? So they are here right now. They are talking to our staff. I am not in those meetings so that they are candid and they are looking through all of these documents. They will then have a report that we will bring through this committee and to the board on the areas that we can improve. And this is a deficit model report. They will not commend us on anything that we're doing well. That's not what this is about. It's about anywhere that we might be able to show some improvement. This is a good thing. This allows us to have focus. We should not be ashamed. We should not be alarmed. If there's areas of need, we want to know them so that we can put our focus there. So I'll stop sharing there. I just wanted to share that that's what's occurring right now. And we do, after questions, we do have a hand up just so that we're aware.
Yeah, okay, so President Phillips, can we extend, what, for 10 minutes? Can we extend to 5:10?
I kept you in a meeting until 3 o'clock in the morning. Yes, you could have 10 minutes.
Hey, I want to tell you, this district needs to improve the benders that we go on.
Yeah, I haven't caught up on my sleep yet.
That was horrible. I didn't even get to steal a rooster off someone's house or something. That was pure pain.
Yeah.
Okay. Vote to extend until 5:10, please.
I think you both said yes, so let's move on to
Okay.
board questions before public.
Yeah, so my question is that this is, I mean, this is a stress test, right?
Yes, it very much is.
Okay.
It's very stressful for me because we had to come up with about 185 documents in the last 2 weeks while doing everything else.
Okay, and there will be no good news.
No, this
It's
is
only
a
bad
deficit
news.
model report,
Okay.
and that's appropriate.
Okay, and then, but it's a good thing. We've reached a point where,
I welcome it. This is good because maybe there's something I don't know that we need to fix. There's about 8 or 10 things I do know, so those will just get validated. But if there's something I don't, I'd really like to know that.
and then do they give you a timeline to fix it, or how does that?
Yeah, if it's something that they believe is mission critical, they're going to recommend straight to the county office that they intervene to get it done. The fact that we're positive is a positive thing, but again, we want to make sure all those position control and all the structures we said we've been investing in, while they're not done, we want to know that we're on the right pathway, and that if there's an area that we need more assistance in, they will direct us to that assistance.
Okay, so then we're going to get a report back. Here are your deficits, and then they give us a timeline, or we give them a timeline to address.
I think it depends on what the issue is. Most likely it is us that will be able to define the timeline, unless it is considered something significant that I can't imagine will come up where there's a cure and correct.
Okay, and then does the district, does the board pass a resolution, or is there any, like, how does the board manage that?
Because our situation has changed since the audit was triggered, there may not be a resolution necessary. There may or may not be some board policy adjustments that we want to make based on some of the findings. And I won't be able to define that until we get everything back. I can tell you, I did it myself. There's 190 questions. I went through and did the stress test myself. We came out at about a 14% risk based on what I know, but it'll be interesting to see what our staff says, because if they can't articulate what I can articulate and we come at a higher stress, that's actually a very important nuance to learn for ourselves to grow from.
Okay, all right, well, I'm very interested. Okay, good. All right, President Phillips, any questions? Figma? Okay, all right, we'll go to public comment on this.
We have one hand raised. Anton Younger, you may unmute.
I support doing a fiscal health risk analysis. I have served as the chief business official for 6 school districts and 1 charter school, including San Francisco Unified and Making Ways Academy. I can testify that the FISMAC tool will help evaluate fiscal health and risk of insolvency. There are 95 questions on this assessment. For example, question 12, evidence of monthly reconciliation of student attendance data at school site and district levels. Question 35, Budget Advisory Committee. Question 50, Position Control Reports. I recommend support. End of my comments.
That ends public comment.
Okay, on to board comments. President Phillips, anything?
I think that if there is an agency an objective outside independent government agency that is willing to come in and look at everything for free, I think we should let them look at everything for free. So this is something that I support. Um, it doesn't matter that I support it, right? I mean, it's what they do. Um, but it is something that I support, and I think that it is much better to let them do. And I had this conversation with the superintendent. I think it's much better to let them come in and do the full look over versus to kind of invite them in, and they only kind of see part of it. Um, um, because I think we could have done that. But I think that so I guess in a way we do have some kind of, you know, input. But I do think letting them come in and do the full shebang, um, and it's free. I think that's the smart thing to do. So those are my comments.
Okay, and my comments is that I'm very interested to learn about this, so I'm going to be following it very closely. I am meeting with them, so I'm on the agenda. And I yeah, I will be following this very closely. I'm very interested to learn and to follow this. So all eyes will be on it. And good, yeah. I think it's progress. Okay, so that's that on that. We'll move to number 3, closing comments from the Board of Education. President Phillips, anything?
No, thank you for a good meeting.
Okay, for me, I would like to schedule cash flows again. And this time I want to take January and March and lay them on top of each other and teach people how to look at the differences and how to question the differences. I think that's important. And then I do want to, for our next meeting, to start looking at presentations, and I'll have some data or some ideas about how to present financial information. We could start to look at some of those things. And I think that is it on closing comments. I thank everybody for coming. I thank our guests. I thank staff. I thank our participants. Once again, open to feedback. So email me on what you think and how it's going. I'm curious to hear what people think and how we can improve. And anything, closing comments from you guys?
Yeah, there's a couple things I was looking to bring at, if not the next, the following. We would like to bring in a full presentation on how we assess the bond market for refinancing of bonds and issuances of new measure bonds. I think it would be a very useful conversation on all of that work that we do with both underwriters and financial advisors. And again, I'm kind of keeping the trend that I'd like to bring in outside folks as often as possible to this committee. So it's not just Regina and my voice, but you're hearing the outside. We know that whenever FCMAT is done, we'll want to have a meeting here before we go to the board, because I'd like it to be a deeper conversation. Here we can take the entire 2 hours and go really deep into it. A board meeting, we wouldn't be able to do that. And then the other thing is, you brought up a tracking dashboard. I would like to agendize that at some point to begin having those conversations.
Yeah, I've got that. I mean, I just didn't feel like it was a major emergency, with everything else that we're dealing with. But I am very used to coming in the morning, opening my computer, and my entire company ran on a set of common metrics, the most important things we needed to know. And I feel like I'm flailing without that. So
I would recommend that sooner rather than later, because building it takes a long time. So the quicker we start the conversation, the more we're moving towards that build. Those are just be my recommendations for at some point we add those two.
Okay, I guess we can start. There's just so much else going on that, I just didn't feel like it was a priority.
Yep. So those are
didn't forget it for sure, but
Yep.
there are metrics that we need to be looking at at least the board, you know, this stuff needs to be available. So might take some board training to look at it or to know, you know, we might need to train ourselves, but for sure. Okay, so that's fine. We can start with that. And then moving on to number 4. Next meeting is Friday, April 16th, 2021, 3 to 5 o'clock. And I appreciate everybody. And I'm so glad it's Friday afternoon.
I got a statute to read.
Oh, I have interviews to do, so I'm still working too.
All right, well, I'm going to go draw on my 8.5 by 14 paper. So, all right.
Thank
Just
you.
send you
Thank
something
you,
that you can
everybody.
print now, okay?
All right. Thank you, everybody.